The session today will be on the state of child online protection in Africa, insights from Kenya. So once again, welcome. So we'll do a round of introduction for our speakers for today. My name is Florence Anyango Gonjo, a research assistant at the Center of Intellectual Property and Information Technology Law. Yes, it's a mouthful, SIPIT, at Strathmore University. And yeah, I'll give a chance to the rest of the speakers to introduce themselves. I'll be the moderator for this panel session.
Thank you, Florence. Good morning, everyone. My name is Athena Morgan. I'm the Regional Project Manager for Africa for the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I am currently based in Kenya, and I'm looking forward to having a very interactive session with you guys. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Joy Katunge Matheka. I work for Kenya Alliance for the Advancement of Children here in Nairobi, and also double up as an LSK representative doing legal aid and public interest, which connects to the work I do. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Aching Odhiambo, formerly research assistant SIPIT, currently fellow at the IT for Change.
Thank you so much for those introductions. We are missing one panelist, but she will be able to join us in probably a few minutes. She's Liz Amandla from Mtoto News. Once she joins us, she'll be able to give you a more comprehensive introduction of what she does. So the structure of this entire session is going to be more conversational and organic. So we are hoping that will be, in as much as you're getting insights from the speakers, we'll also be able to get insights from you as the participants. So just also introducing yourselves, I'd like for each of the panelists to also be able to sort of expound on the work that they do with relation to children and child online protection, with relation to also the work that you've done. And in doing that, also give us sort of a more structured and more structured insight on what the state is with respect to the overall outline in Africa. What does that look like with respect to child online protection?
So what does child rights to privacy and that kind of thing look like? I was doing research on AI and children, just looking at the edtech platforms that children are using or started using during the pandemic and have continued using it. And one of the things that the study found was that, yes, there are governments, there are countries that are trying to look into children's rights to privacy and just how children are being protected in the digital age, but there is still much that needs to be done. So the research looked at various countries, namely Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, bits of South Africa, and that kind of thing. And it was more or less similar across the board because, yes, the laws provide, the data protection laws provide for children's right to privacy, but then why then are we having this conversation when you're not even involving the children who are the primary stakeholders? So there's a bit of a gap. I wouldn't say bit. There's a very huge gap because, yes, we are talking about children and how to protect them online, but you're not really involving them. Yes.
Thank you so much, Florence, for that question. What I've been able to do, and maybe what I do, is the organization I work for, CAC, Kenya Alliance for the Advancement of Children, is a member organization to ECPAT International. And 2 years ago, we led a research on online child sexual exploitation. We led with it on data collection. And to this far, it's the latest or the most recent document that we keep referring to on matters statistics, facts, and even recommendations that were given after the research. So I gladly took part in that aspect of data collection. And one thing I learned during that exercise is that, contrary to what I thought before, that child abuse in the digital space happens in the urban places like the cities. I remember going for interviews as far as Migori, the most interior bits of Migori, Meru, places you wouldn't expect to find a case. So I learned that besides just concentrating our programs in the cities where we think there's electricity, connectivity, and gadgets, we should also enlarge our programs to go into the interior bits, because internet penetration in Kenya is quite high. Other than taking part in the DH research, I supported UNICEF in the development of a curriculum, a training guide for justice actors. So modules for police, because they're the first respondents, a module for prosecutors, a module for lawyers, of course, and the judiciary. So there is a training guide that these professionals can be taken through so that they better understand the issues that surround online safety of children in their work. And I also sit in the National Technical Working Group on Online Child Sexual Exploitation, which is convened by the Directorate of Children's Services, where we just sit to discuss the state of children in the digital space in Kenya. So those are just but a few that I can mention for now.
Thank you for the work that you guys have mentioned that you're doing, and there's something interesting that you mentioned before I proceed to what ICMEC is doing, and that's the issue of privacy. And there's a statement that has become, let me say, popular now in the child space, where it says that privacy should not be seen in exclusion of safety. So anytime we talk about privacy, we also have to talk about safety, because sometimes we lean on the issue of privacy and not overstepping, and as a result of that, we end up endangering the children. So I'd like to see more of what you have done and your line of thought along that, because I know it's a very controversial issue, and people can't seem to agree where to draw the line. Like, is it okay for a parent to check their child's phone? Until what age should the parent check the phone? So those are very interesting topics that I think we can look at even as we progress, so that we know how best to keep children safe. And as ICMEC and Athena have been in the child protection space for a while, I used to work with Communications Authority and AFRALTI to develop the child online protection training for stakeholders here in Kenya. And currently, ICMEC is big on capacity building. What we are doing now in Africa, we are coming to the end of the first year being in Africa. It's been very active in Europe and America. And what we are doing is looking at the gaps that exist when it comes to online child protection, especially on the issues of sexual exploitation and abuse. You'll find that when we are talking about online abuse, most of the time people focus on online harassment, cyberbullying, you know, and we forget that there is the issue of online sexual exploitation. And that brings us to the biggest challenge that we are facing is in most African countries, because ICMEC is not just working in Kenya, you find that the sexual conversation is a taboo. So if we can't talk about sexual abuse in the offline platform, introducing the conversation of sexual abuse of children on the online platform becomes a bit tricky, because parents would be in denial, first of all, and then children are also very intimidated about talking about this sexual kind of exploitation that they're facing on the online platform. So one of the things that we are doing is assessing the gaps that exist in collaboration, and then working closely with local stakeholders to do capacity building. And the capacity building is from the ground up, so that we can work with the children officers, who are the ones who are like the first responders when it comes to dealing, or who are introduced to the child after an abuse has happened. We also work closely with the criminal justice sector in different countries, so that they know how to use the technological tools available to be able to investigate. You know, it's not enough to just say that I've been abused online. Where is the evidence? And if you know anything about law, you can't just go to court and say, hey, I've been abused. You have to have evidence, and to have this evidence, it has to have been preserved from the onset, and which takes us back to the parents. As a parent, when your child reports abuse, what do? Do Do you destroy the device? Do you tell them off? Or do you go to the next person who's going to help this child? So you'll see it's like a kind of a staircase whereby every stakeholder has a role to play. And as ICMEC, we are working closely and looking to work closely with the countries within Africa to be able to build the capacity so that even without the assistance of international organizations, local organizations and local structures can still stand by their own and be able to follow the processes to ensure that all children are safe when they're online. And finally, just to add on that, we have the issue of missing children. And you find that nowadays, children don't need to be enticed by teddy bears and sweets to be able to follow a stranger, right? Initially, it used to be when you're walking out of school, someone calls and is like, hey, here's a sweet, and then you walk away with a stranger. Today, that doesn't happen. It hardly happens. But we still have children being trafficked, children being taken away from home, and this is happening through online solicitation. So the other thing is looking at the intersectionality between online solicitation and missing and trafficking of children, especially for child sexual abuse in the tourism industry, which is something that we have not also paid attention to as African countries. And as at now, we are working very closely with the Directorate of Children's Services, the Department of Missing Children, to be able to identify the current gaps existing in Kenya. And we'll be doing a joint event on the 25th of May, and after that we'll start comprehensive capacity building for all the key stakeholders. So for now, that's a summary of what we are doing, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Athena, Joy, and Rachel as well. So Liz, welcome. I would just allow you to introduce yourself. Then as you're introducing yourself, please let us know how child online protection feeds into the work that you're currently doing.
Thank you so much. Apologies, I'm late. My name is Liz Amandla Busisa. I work at Mtoto News as legal officer and head of research and also HR. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya as well, but I'm very passionate about children and children's rights. So how does child online protection fit in the work that I do? At Mtoto News, we are a digital media company, and we work a lot with children, and we train them on digital literacy as well as child rights advocacy. And as we train them in digital literacy, we take them through a program where they are taught and given knowledge and information about online safety as well, and just how to identify different types of dangers that they can encounter while engaging in the online space. And as we do this, we capacitate them. We also inform their parents that they're going through this training, so we don't do it apart from the knowledge of their parents, so that their parents also know that this is what we are teaching their kids, and also their kids are able to, as they go home, as they interact with their parents and other children, they're able to even inform them of some of the dangers and risks that they are prone to face while they're engaging in the online space. And one of the things that became very interesting in my line of work, even as a researcher, is the issue of the metaverse. I'm sure some of us or all of us are actually aware of the metaverse space, and children are very active in that space. It's a virtual reality space where children get to engage. They play games in that space. I recently heard that some children get to own property, or they buy, I don't know, some stuff in the online space, and they get to interact, they get to exchange with total strangers online. Some of them are very, they get lured by strangers online by using avatars, because you don't go there with your real face, and you create a character or an avatar where you get to interact with other people online whom you've never met, whom you don't know. So some of these emerging issues that come up in the digital space is something that is very interesting to me, and even as Mtoto News, and as we teach children, as we build their capacity on digital literacy, these are some of the things that we get to train them in. And we are very passionate about child participation, because anything that involves children has to include children. They're the ones who engage in these spaces in their day-to-day lives. So how best to address these issues? than to listen to children themselves, get it from the horse's mouth. So we get to have that one-on-one interaction with the children. They tell us these are the things, these are the activities that they engage in online. And for example, if they encounter something that is strange, something that poses a risk to them that they may not be aware of, they come to us and tell us, and we are able to address them. And we don't work alone. Some of my colleagues here are very familiar people in my line of work. We work together with Athena, Morgan, with Joy, and we get to just create awareness on online child sexual exploitation and abuse, together with the government as well, DCS, the Department of Child Online Protection. We work very closely with them on OXEA. That is the short for online child sexual exploitation and abuse, sorry. So we have developed we are currently developing a training manual for the social service workforce in collaboration with many other civil society organizations in Kenya on OXEA, and this is something that will be able to create awareness in society about child online protection and how practitioners in the space are able to identify and report and do the whole process, go through the whole process of managing the cases and getting feedback as well, how the cases have been handled. So that's just a nutshell of what I do in terms of child online protection.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thank you all so much for those very comprehensive elaborations of what you do and how it links to child online protection as you do your work. So in line with this, I'd like to drive the focus more onto looking at the children themselves as they're using the online platforms, as they're using digital services. To what extent would you say that child online protection has been made important, especially to children, and in terms of building the capacity of children themselves when they're using digital services, when they're using online platforms? Can start from you, Liz, then come back up.
Okay, I think I've mentioned this even as I introduced myself. Involving children is very important. One of the mantras that goes around is, for children, is nothing for us without us. So they have to be involved in everything that concerns them, especially child online protection. We are currently living in a digital space where children are very active online on social media, and they get to interact with their friends, they get to interact with strangers. Some of them, this is how they make friends in the online spaces. And it's very easy for them to be lured. It's very easy for them to face bullying even among their peers, people who are known to them and people who are not known to them. So engaging children, as I mentioned, one of the ways is to have a sit down with them and listen. Just yesterday we had a summit, Africa Children's Summit, and one of the topics that we talked about is media and technology, as well as violence against children in the online space. And some of the issues that the children were able to raise were that they meet strangers online. Some of them get lured by these strangers they meet in person after they have interacted a bit online, and they get to be abused sexually once they meet these people in person. Others say that they have been bullied by their peers, both by their peers, even other older people that they interact with in the online space. Others, they engage in sextortion, sending text messages, sexting, something that we call sexting. So they have gone through different forms of online abuse, forms of exploitation that affects their safety in the online space. And as we sat down and listened to them, they also gave us some of the recommendations that they would like for us as stakeholders in that space to be able to do so that we protect their safety online. They want to have child-friendly spaces in the online space. As they log into, for example, Facebook, there has to be a child-friendly section for them. If they log on to Instagram, the same thing. YouTube, the same thing. I know YouTube now has YouTube Kids, but still there's some content there that's very harmful to children. So some of these spaces need to be regulated. There needs to be very strict policies concerning the safety of children in these spaces, even as they interact. So that's just a brief of what I can contribute.
Thank you, Liz, for that, and congratulations for the just ended summit. I wish I could have attended it. I got the invite late. So with regard to children, I'd like to look at it from a bit of an international perspective. And first of all, my biggest challenge has been, since I started working with ICMEC, is most of the time what we do is we consume data. So we are told this is what is best for the children, and since it works for the children in the UK, in the US, in China, then it should work for the African child. But first of all, I don't believe in that. And as Liz was saying, we have YouTube kids, yeah, which has content that probably from the US, where this content is being generated, they say it's okay for their kids, right? But you as an African parent, you look at it and you're like, no, this is not content that I want my child to be watching, you know? So I think one of the things that we should be looking forward to doing, I'm sorry, I'm like giving a recommendation, yeah, so is coming up with content that is actually significant and relevant for us as Africans. I'm not saying that we can't borrow international best practice. Of course we can, we all learn from each other, but that doesn't mean that we are constantly consumers. Something else is the best interest of the child, and this is not only reflected in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also in the Children's Act. And for us, the question becomes, what's the best interest of the child and who determines it? And when we discuss this, someone says, okay, so as a parent, I can come out and say, I was thoroughly spanked when I was a kid and I turned out fine, you know? So it's okay for me to spank my kid anytime they make a mistake. But we know that children for 10, 20 years ago and children for today are very different, right? Meaning that the methods that worked back then may not work right now. And spanking might be one of them. If I ask a question maybe related to sex back then, I would have been spanked and I'd have kept quiet about it and never brought up the issue, right? Right now, if a kid asks that and you spank them and tell them off, what will they do? They'll go online and research, isn't it? And they might find content that will mislead them. They might go to a neighbor or just some random person and ask them, because now kids have options and they know that. So when we're talking about best interest of the child, as Liz said, it is important to sit down with the child, talk to them, and hear their perspective. And that doesn't mean that we give them 100% leeway. There is what we call the maturity level of a child. So I can't put a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old in the same room and ask them what is internet for you and how best do you need to interact with the internet. No, we have to know what is the maturity level of the children we are engaging with at this moment. What is it that they feel would be relevant to them? Then we as the adults in their life try to walk with them, not imposing or doing what worked back then, but walking with them to make it easier to live in this digital era. And I'm sure all of you agree, most of the time we are playing catch up with the kids who have been born into internet, right? Yeah, and then finally, I think with ICMEC, the closest we've come to working with children is through educators. Last week, we just ended the first cohort of training for educators in schools that have been connected by Liquid Intelligence Technology Internet under the UNICEF project. And we believe that by empowering teachers who spend most of the time with their children, then even as the teachers introduce children into this CBC, the digital curriculum, and how to use internet, they will just tell them, go home and research this topic on history, but they'll tell them, avoid pop-ups, don't talk to strangers, you know, because teachers are the ones who spend majority of the time with children, and they're the ones who most likely will introduce them to technology. So in Kenya, we've been working with Liquid Intelligence, and we're going to continue doing the same. We are also in conversation with MTN for some countries in Southern Africa and Western Africa, where we'll be doing more training for educators on the same, hoping that it will have a trickle-down effect to the children, especially when it comes to online safety. Thank you.
I don't know how much I can add after Liz and Athena, but a few points here. So I think this year will mark my 12th year working with children and for children. And one thing that I have learned is technology will forever be ahead of the law. So we can only play catch up. And the same way water can drown you, water is life. The same way fire can scorch you, we need fire for warmth and many other things. So technology is going to be here with us. Our children are going to be here, but they won't be children forever. I want to make reference to something that my two colleagues have mentioned, the best interest of a child. Of late, as we discuss the best interest of the child, I get asking myself, what is this best interest of the child? A child in our Kenyan context is anyone under the age of 18. So we could be having a child's best interest, something that is relevant to this 5-year-old in 2023, but 10 years old, the child will be 15, still a child, but is that still that child's best interest? So in response to that, of course, I can't give an answer to that, but I believe that we need to have the continuous engagement of children in the development of our laws, in the development of our policies, because children issues are cross-cutting issues. There's nothing that you can discuss and fail to have a child in mind. Talk about agriculture, food security, nutrition, children fall there. Traffic, as random as it may sound, zebra crossings, school buses, safety on the road, just think about anything. Children will be there in it. So the first one is totally involving children in every engagement. Being a lawyer, of course, I think about the legal space. When you're developing any legislation, any policy, getting it from the horse's mouth, what do children want to see in these laws? Where does the shoe pinch? So that is one. And I'd like to make reference to the current Children Act 2022. Children were thoroughly involved in all aspects. We had children give their input, and if you look at it, it actually acknowledges the issues. It actually acknowledges child online abuse as a form of abuse. The other way how I interact with children is by making sure that we have child online safety programs mainstreamed in all other activities, in all projects, from the proposal writing bit of it. I say that children issues are cross-cutting issues. There's nothing you will discuss as a child protection practitioner or even in whatever space without thinking about a child. So I ensure that in whatever project, in whatever activity that you're going to be having, be it child labor, be it menstrual hygiene, just whatever, include the aspect of online safety in it. Then there's capacity building and awareness raising, where whenever we go for work-based activities, whether invited or initiated by the organization I work for, you create awareness of the tools, the reporting tools, all these social media apps, all the social media platforms do have a reporting tool. But most of us, even as adults, do not know what to do if you find, allow me to use a word that we do not encourage, child pornography. We call it CSAM. It's child sexual abuse material. We use that in place of child pornography. But if you find CSAM on Instagram, most of us do not even know what to do. You find us sharing on WhatsApp, making circles, how can we help this person? But we are just making the situation worse. So what I do is that I create awareness on how to use these reporting tools within the social media platforms. And also, I must acknowledge and applaud our Kenyan government. We have made strides when it comes to child online safety. We have the NPA, National Plan of Action, to tackle online child sexual exploitation that was launched last year for the next 5 years. And it really it sheds light and gives a pathway on each stakeholder's role in ensuring that children remain safe in Kenya when using the digital space. So in Kenya, we have the KSAT, Kenya Computer Incidents Response Team. This is responsible for takedown. How many of us know? And always ask yourself, if you do not know of how to react to online abuse cases as an adult, then what happens to children? We even have the 116. The way we have 999, a police number, we have the 116, that is a national toll-free number dedicated to handle children matters, be it online, offline. But how many of us know? So I take it upon myself that whenever I go, I preach about these services, because at times we suffer, not because the services are not there, but because we do not know about them. And finally, We've had involvement of other stakeholders. Of course, children are our key stakeholders. Nothing for us without us. That's children. But in the past, we seemed to ignore the role that the church, mosque, the religious bodies play in terms of safeguarding the rights of children, the well-being of children. So we've been working with religious bodies to just ensure that children remain safe, because you've heard about the programs running in school. But Monday to Friday, children are in school. How about the weekend? They're going for madrasa, they're going for Sunday school. So we're trying to make sure that wherever these children are, they are protected. Maybe just a mention, but it wouldn't come, best from me, is that the KICD has incorporated the aspect of online safety for children. KICD is the body responsible for curriculum
development,
yes,
and approval.
Yes, approval of the curriculum that is running in Kenya. So that goes to tell us that the government is hands-on. They know there's a problem. They know that technology is going to be here, but at least we can sit down, safe assured that the government is doing its thing, the CSO is doing its thing, and everyone has to do something at the end of the day.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if I can add anything, but I will say from a legal researcher point of view, there's really little to no interaction with children in this sense. There are a lot of processes, a lot of reviews, assessments, and clearance that a legal researcher has to go through to actually get to the point where they're like, okay, now I can talk to the child. And I think when I was doing research, the limitation that came with that was that, so I was looking at EdTech platform, educational technology platforms, and I would look at the privacy policies, at the platforms and how they're set up, and I'm like, I don't know how a child would be able to navigate this, because if as an adult I cannot, I mean, what is a child doing using this platform? And also one of the things I noted was that there was little to no mention of even the children themselves, what kind of data is being collected, how they can bring their parents on board, and that kind of thing. And it was really, like, I put on my legal thinking cap, and I'm like, but the child does not even understand the law. The child does not even understand what is being collected. Like probably the developer or the educator would be like, give us this kind of information, but they don't know that they're actually protected by law. And so the gap comes about because Athena, Joy, and Liz, like, they do the hands-on, the practical bit of training them and doing all these things. And I think this is where collaboration is necessary, because if I'm able to understand the laws, if I'm able to simplify them to an extent that a child may be able to understand, then I would need to work with my colleagues to just help them understand it further, like bring it to a level that they can understand. And I think, yeah, so that comes in knowing the people, like who are the stakeholders and what role do they play and how can we collaborate, and just simplifying the processes and the systems to a level that comes to the child, like a child-friendly process and system. Yeah.
Thank you so much for those comments and remarks with respect to capacity building and how children are directly involved with respect to online protection. So just tying into the conversation you've just started with respect to existing laws and policies, to what extent do you think that the existing laws and policies are sufficient in terms of either addressing or acknowledging child online protection, especially within the Kenyan context, and we can sort of bring it out towards the African context? And tying into that, what is now the place of data protection and privacy with respect to child online protection and its linkage to the existing laws that we have? Because we have the Data Protection Act, yes, and to an extent it acknowledges the rights of the child, the data protection rights of the child, which are often enforceable by their guardians or their parents. So to what extent does this then link into enabling, into sort of validating and acknowledging that child online protection is actually something that should be acknowledged within policy and legislature?
Thank you. About the laws, yes, there are laws in place. There is the Children's Act, which was reviewed in 2022. There is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. That they all talk about children's rights to privacy, but they fail to mention or expound on safety, which is something that goes hand in hand. So the three things that go hand in hand when it comes to this are privacy, trust, and safety. But the laws are very particular, very focused on privacy, and you may seem to miss or probably fail to notice the bit that covers safety and trust. So there are laws in place. Most countries are trying. They're trying to involve children. They're trying to have child-friendly laws and processes. And I think things that I noticed was UNESCO. UNESCO has a breakdown of rights, and it's so well written. It's so beautifully done. It has like illustrations, and the language is very simple and very, like, you know how you would communicate to a child? That's how it is. So there are strides that are being made both on a national level and a regional level, also internationally. So there's still much more to be done, but there are strides that are being made.
In regards to the legal framework, I keep insisting that technology will forever be ahead of the law. So I don't foresee any day that we'll sit and say children are sufficiently covered in our legislation. Even looking at some of the countries like France, where it has been reported that they have the best data protection laws when it comes to children's digital safety, and even the likes of South Africa, they still have challenges as we stand, because technology keeps evolving and law does not move as fast as technology. So allow me to speak in our national context, Kenya, then Athena and Liz can support on the regional ones that I might not mention. But in Kenya, we have, allow me to use sufficient, but we have laws that we can make reference to when it comes to matters online safety. First being the parent law, which is the Constitution. Our Constitution and Article 53 elaborates on the rights of a child, and a child has to be kept safe, who has these responsibilities. Then trickles down to the Children Act of 2022 that talks about child online safety, and the child needs to be protected from any harm that may occasion in whatever space, online or offline. Then we have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. I think this is section 24, that categorically lists a lot of crimes that could be occasioned against a child and criminalizes them, and gives even the fines that can accrue from maybe sharing child pornography, sextortion, grooming, and all those. Those are three. The Data Protection Act actually has a very small mention, section 33, that just talks about how this data needs to be handled, about consent, about just verification of this is a child and this is how I'm going to handle the data. And the Sexual Offences Act, where we want to talk about online child sexual exploitation and abuse, which I believe is one of the gravest abuses that can be occasioned against a child in the digital space. The SOA, the Sexual Offences Act, is very elaborate on matters online safety. And maybe to mention, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act is a rather recent act compared to the SOA, the Sexual Offences Act, and it even made an amendment to the Sexual Offences Act to include sexual communication with a minor, which is now criminalized. So those national laws that I've mentioned just go ahead to show us that we have laws that can be relied on. If our police are empowered and capacity built to know how to handle the evidence, which is different from a defilement case. For a defilement case, once you go to the local police station, we have been taught, I believe everyone knows, once you find a child who's been sexually abused, defiled, you know what to do. Do not bathe, carry the soiled clothes in a brown bag, not a polythene bag. We know it like gospel, but do we know what to do once you come across a child pornographic video or photo or illustration? We do not know this, so we are yet to get there. So once we empower the police, prosecution on what to look out for, the judiciary, how to listen to these cases, what to be checking out for, where to find these laws, I believe we're going to go far because the law is there. And maybe looking at policy, we have what I had earlier mentioned, the National Plan of Action on to tackle online child sexual exploitation and abuse, OXEA. So the law is there. Where to find the law, how to find the law, is the law being used again? That's another question. Kenya has some of the best laws you will ever come across. Some that upon entry to law school, I was getting shocked. Coconut law, I mean the act on coconuts, on busa, on witchcraft, I mean, things you'd never guess. So we have good laws, but the implementation remains a problem. In the international realm, we have the African Charter on the Welfare of Children that talks about state parties protecting children against sexual exploitation and abuse, and even the UNCRC echoes the same. So for me, sitting as a child practitioner, child safety practitioner, I believe the laws are there, but the implementation is the greatest gap that we have.
Thank you for that, Joy. And the word implementation is what you have used towards the end. And I think I agree with you totally on that. And not just in Kenya, but I think from 2019 there was, excuse me, there's a kind of rush in most of the African countries to include online abuse of children in the laws. So you'll find in most of the countries the amendments to the Children's Act was in 2019, 2020, 2021 to 2022, which is an interesting wave, but it shows progress. And when Joy is talking about implementation, then the thing is, okay, so we have established for a fact that technology will develop faster than the law, right? What about the personnel? The people who are supposed to implement this law. Okay, so Joy has the knowledge to say that this is a crime, but does she have the technical assistance and capacity to be able to gauge, to go through the step-by-step process needed? And I'm saying this maybe in regard to law enforcement. As she said, carry the, if it's a physical defilement case, carry the clothes, 1, 2, 3, you know, those are simple things. But to be able to investigate online crimes, you just can't do it with your Microsoft Word, you know, or some basic computer program that we have. It has to be tools that you have to learn, tools that you may need to purchase. So maybe the law enforcement in Kenya or in Nigeria is really determined to implement the law, but is the country in a position to support the implementers of the law to be able to implement it? And I think this is the biggest challenge that we are seeing right now as ICMEC, even as we do capacity building. So you tell them there is for example, we have the ICSE database, the database for child sexual exploitation that is with Interpol, or we have the NECMEC reporting sites. But okay, so what? There are these sites, there are cases from Kenya there. How do we deal with them? How do we break them down, you know? So yes, we have laws. Yes, we have a group of people who are very determined to implement these laws. But then we see that when it comes to the implementation part, other than the personnel being there, sometimes either they are less. I think like in Kenya, the DCI, we have less than 20 specialized, less than 10 specialized officers dealing with child online crimes in the whole of the country. So if they're based in Nairobi and we have like a handful in Mombasa, how about the crimes that are happening online in other parts of the country? Who's dealing with them, you know? So now this goes back to me where I have a very big problem with governments where they say, oh, we don't have budget for that, or we don't know how to buy these tools and pay the annual fees, which I don't know. I don't know how we're going to address that issue, but adding to what Joy has said, the laws in Africa are becoming very progressive. The laws in Kenya are very progressive. Actually, I think Kenya's DCI, Child Protection Unit, is the most advanced in Africa, even more than South Africa, because South Africa wants to come and benchmark in Kenya. But you see, imagine now people are coming to benchmark only less than 20 officers serving an entire country. What does that tell us about the other countries in Africa, you know? And now the question becomes, how best can we mobilize resources and create an agency within government, within international NGOs, so that you're just not coming here to give us word of mouth, let us build capacity, but if you have the tools that can be used in implementing of these laws, because it is a complex aspect that cannot be dealt with basic tools. How do we bring our resources together to be able to ensure that we not only build capacity, but we equip countries with the tools they need to be able to sustain themselves in the process of implementing online child protection? And also, how can governments commit the same way they have budget for parliamentarians to billions? Why can't they have budgets for child online protection, you know? So those are some of the things maybe I think we can be looking at or thinking of, even as we are talking about laws and implementation. Sometimes there is the goodwill, there is the desire. I know Joy wants to help children, but without the proper tools, it becomes difficult even for countries. So maybe next time during this conversation, we need to have someone from government. We're like, okay, guys, we are here, we want to help. How are you helping us so that we can help the children of Kenya and of Africa in general? Thank you.
Well, I don't think I have really much to add. They have spoken so much, some of which I also wanted to say. And just to avoid repetition, one of the things I'd like to mention is on the aspect of the international conventions, international legislations that exist. Unfortunately, yes, they do exist, but unfortunately in Africa, most countries have not either signed or even ratified as part of their law. So it's very difficult even to implement and to further progress the state of our legal systems in the different countries in Africa. For example, we have the Budapest Convention, we have the Lanzarote Convention, we have the Malabo Convention. These conventions, they talk about, what's the word? They address the issues of privacy, they address the issue of data protection, they address the issues of online safety, but countries have either completely not ratified, others have put reservations on some of these clauses, so it's very difficult to implement, and something needs to be done about it, because even here in Kenya, we have a provision in our constitution where we are allowed to adopt international conventions and legislations. But if we as a country, I don't think we've even ratified the conventions that I have just mentioned, Malabo, Lanzarote, and the Budapest Conventions. We've not ratified these laws, and they're very important when it comes to addressing child online protection. So for us to be able to, well, as Joy mentioned, we cannot really catch up with technology. The law cannot catch up with technology, but we still have to make the necessary efforts for us to ensure that our legal systems, our legal structures align to the international conventions that have been agreed by other countries, so that we are able to even learn from each other and get best practices on how we can improve our legal systems in our different countries.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the panelists. So I will open up the floor for about 3 very, very, very burning questions. So hands up. There we go. There we go. One more person. Okay, I'll be the last one to ask the question then. Thanks. Thank
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jacqueline Rowe, and I'm from an organization called Global Partners Digital. Thank you so much for this panel. It's been really fascinating and helpful. I live and work in London, and we are in the UK developing the online safety bill, which maybe you've heard of some of those discussions, and it touches on a lot of child safety issues. And my question is, I have two questions, if I can be cheeky. The two kind of most contentious issues when it comes to child safety in that legislative process is first the detection of CSAM on encrypted channels, and how you do that without creating backdoors to encryption or risking people's privacy. And then the second contentious issue in that process is how do you know whether it's a child accessing the contents? And so in that piece of legislation, then technology companies will be required to age verify all of their users, which there are still many concerns about privacy risks if everyone has to provide ID or have their face scanned in order to access Wikipedia, for example, then this is problematic in other ways. So I'm really curious to hear your opinions on either or both of those kind of contentious topics and where the debates are in the Kenyan context, and what your opinions are personally as well. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is John. I'm from Residence Technologies. And first of all, I would like to really comment on the good job that you guys are doing in regards to child protection online. It's a good job that you're doing, so congratulations on that. So my question, or what I'm curious to hear from you guys is, you're the best people to tell us, or you have the data in regards to what is happening to children online. You have the research, you have the data. So I want to hear or just understand, what policies are you recommending to the government or the social media, the social providers, the tech companies that are giving access to everything that children are doing online? What policies, recommendations are you have you done, or are you giving out? Because I had that lady shied away from recommendations, but you're the best person to give us the recommendations. We need, as tech companies, I run a tech company, and I need to know if there are, these policies. I need to understand that, the data that you have, because we are consuming a lot of data, and I want you to focus on Kenya. I'm not saying that don't focus on Africa, but what are you specifically recommending for the Kenyan child, right? For the Kenyan kid who needs access to the internet, because at the end of the day, as you've said, we'll just have to catch up with technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this question. So my question would relate to generally the overall conversation that we've had, and in terms of also the recommendations that you would give with respect to what would be best to implement, or with respect to the gaps that are existing and how those gaps would be possibly filled. And then as you do that, you can make your closing remarks, because we are almost out of time. Thank you.
Okay. So on the issue of privacy, and I'd like to talk about the aspect of age verification. I understand the dangers that come with it, because right now technology is very unpredictable. We have hackers, people who can manipulate the system to ensure that they have access to certain sites. Children nowadays learn coding in school, so they have that skill, they have that knowledge on how to navigate some of these complex websites, some of these complex systems online. So age verification is something that is quite new here in Kenya. One of my colleagues at work is currently working on a project to create a child-friendly space where children are able to interact in the online space. And one of the things that she has been working on is the aspect of age verification, because some children, if we talk about even facial scanning as one of the techniques for age verification, some children may appear older than they look. So when you scan their faces, the app might pick up that this child could be over 18 years old. So there's still some things that need to be done to make sure that even besides facial recognition, facial scanning, what else can be put in place in those systems, in those spaces for children to be identified and to have their correct ages identified in these spaces. We also have the issue of parental consent. Again, just borrowing from this project that my colleague is working on, we are looking to have parents also be involved in that space in terms of consent for their children. So if a child wants to access this child-friendly space, the parent will be sent a prompt that your child needs to sign in or sign up to this space, so they have to give consent, and so that the child is able to access this space, plus other things that go into assessing the age of a child. So in Kenya, it's still a new concept. People don't really know about it. I'm sure abroad it's something that's very familiar, something that could be in practice even now. But in Kenya, it's very new. And personally, I think there's still more that needs to be done in terms of assessing the age of children when accessing such sites, and to be able to even protect their data, their privacy in the online spaces, so that they're not subject to OXEA. And the other question, policy recommendations for people who work in the tech space, as well as even internet service providers. I'd say, one, let me put it to the government, because the government, parliament to be exact, is the arm of government that is mandated to form policies and laws. So parliament, one, awareness needs to be created on the importance of child online protection and safety. Because if our lawmakers are not aware of the things that are happening in the online space, then how can they make good laws that are in line with what is happening currently in the digital space, to be able to come up with policies that address those issues. So one, create awareness on the importance of child online protection and safety to the lawmakers, so that once they sit in parliament to formulate laws, they have that knowledge, they have that background, and they'll be able to come up with well-informed laws. And also involve children in the process, because these laws are going to affect children. So have a sit down with children, get to listen to them, and even ask them for what they want, what kind of spaces do they want to interact with, what kind of environment they want to interact with in the digital space. So if children are not involved, then some of these laws will just be in vain. And also, as the laws are being formulated, make them child-friendly. Children, we have different groups of children. There are children who are the younger ones below 10, there are those between 11 and 15, then 16, 17. So they have different stages of understanding, their brains develop differently, and what a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old understands is not the same thing as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old is able to understand. So make these laws and policies friendly to the children, so that as they interact with them, as they get into the online space and you have those very long privacy policies, they're able to find something, just even a line or two, just to explain to them what are some of these things that are in these apps, are in these spaces that they can encounter, how can they report. So make it extremely child-friendly by involving children. And, 2 minutes. Okay, let me make my closing remarks. So I'd like to say that being in this child online protection space, it's important to always involve children. Again, nothing for us without us. This is what the children say. It's important to involve children, make sure that the laws are child-friendly, create awareness on what needs to be done to the different stakeholders, so that even when we formulate laws and policies, they are actually relevant and they address the main issues that are on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I will be as brief as possible. I want to give one example. 2 years ago when we started the discussion about, and this question mainly addresses the question by the gentleman, and 2 years ago when we started the conversation on the role of internet service providers in keeping children safe online, one of the gentlemen who actually I had a discussion with said, if you go to a store and purchase a pipe, the person who made the pipe does not say this pipe is only for clean water or this pipe is only for dirty water. Whatever you do with that pipe is entirely up to you, because my work was just coming up with a pipe. And that is how ISPs viewed their role in child protection back then. I am very glad to see that it has changed. So that brings us to the question of safety by design. We need to know that technology in itself will always affect children, adults, everyone who interacts with it. So as you are coming up with your technology, as you are providing your services, you must ensure as a personal responsibility, as a tech company, as an individual, that you cater for the needs of various individuals who you foresee will use your technology. And finally, does technology exist in a vacuum? Is technology used by robots? Who uses technology? Us, human beings, right? So we can't leave the entire burden to the tech companies because you say, okay, we need facial recognition. Yes, we do sometimes. We need age verification. Yes, we do. But how many of us have kids who are less than 10 years but have Facebook accounts? Or how many of us give our nieces and nephews access to social media sites that are for an older age? As in, come on, do we expect Twitter to come knocking on your door and saying your 4-year-old should not be on Twitter? No? That can't happen, right? So tech does not exist in a vacuum. As human beings, we need to know that at the end of the day, the overall responsibility lies with us, which means that as much as tech companies are putting in the effort, as much as they're putting in these safeguards, we all have a role to play to ensure that we complement their efforts. Otherwise, regardless of how many safeguards they put, face recognition, my son will come and say, put your face here, and I open the account in my name, and then I give it to him. I have bypassed the safety. Whose fault is it? Is it for the social media or is it mine? It's mine, right? So at the end of the day, my parting remark is tech does not exist in a vacuum. We have to play a complementary role as individuals, as organizations, as tech companies to ensure that we are creating a balance and not leaving the burden on only one person so that it can be easy to blame and finger point and say, oh, it is your fault. We all have a role to play. Let's play it collaboratively. Let's discuss, let's engage, and at the end of the day, we will all ensure that every child is safe online at the end of a very long day. Thank you.
Joy, brief.
Very brief. Briefer than the rest. So end-to-end encryption still remains a challenge in our context. Giving a straight example like WhatsApp, it still proves, it's still difficult where you cannot get the gadget of both the perpetrator and the survivor or the victim. So that's still a challenge in our context. Age verification, I won't belabor, it's exactly what she said, but I believe there's more that can be done by everyone just taking up responsibility, doing your part and doing it well. Citing our Sexual Offences Act, which talks about if I walk into a bar and find a boy taking alcohol in a bar where clearly 18 and over should be there, and I go home and have sex with him, it is a justification in our law to say that I thought he was an adult because we met in a bar, and bars are meant for over 18. So we still have that lacuna in our law. Safety by design has been discussed. We are coming up with standard operating procedures for even the tech industry, just highlighting like a one page, just telling you, once you find this information, this is how you're supposed to do it, because the repercussions are this, just making sure that everyone is held responsible for what they do. So yes, we have the data and we are coming up with the SOPs that will be used by the different actors when it comes to child protection. Parting shot, I'm really trying to be fast. Parting shot, we say that it takes a village to raise a child. This is the, internet has made the world a digital village. During my grandmother's time, the greatest challenge was the village dances. During my mother's time, it was maybe walking in dark alleys, but now the times I'm living in is actually my child being on a gadget. So each one of us has to play the role that they need to play in this village. If you're in the tech industry, if you're a teacher, you're a parent, just remember that you've heard today that there is a problem somewhere. We trust you to be the foot soldiers, to go out there and preach the gospel of safety to our children. Thank you.
I think if I say short, that will make more sense. Because brief wasn't landing, so short.
I will keep it short. I think all the questions have been answered, so I'll just give a closing remark. In 2 words: simple, child-friendly. That is essentially what we need to consider, and I'm glad to see developers in the room, policymakers, researchers, and basically everyone who deals with children on whatever level that they deal with them at. Just make the laws, make privacy, trust, safety simple in a manner that they can understand it. And when you're developing products, laws, systems, processes, make them child-friendly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was very short. So thank you so much for the audience. Thank you for being here. And thank you so much to the panelists for a very, 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 very constructive conversation. This was good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys.